Hey, thanks to everyone who's tuning in live. This is another episode of Going Elliptic, and this is kind of our six-week running now. So yeah, really getting into stream of things, getting some exciting guests on, and hopefully to all the regular subscribers, you're really enjoying the content. So yeah, thanks. If you do want to hear more, don't forget to like or subscribe. And before we jump in, I'll just remind everyone this is not investment advice. It's very much educational content, and we hope you enjoy it and learn something today. Hey, Shanky.
Hey there, Paul. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. It's been a nice weekend, a little bit more relaxed.
That's good. We're getting slowly into that nicer, warmer weather everywhere, I guess, at this time of the year.
Yeah, yep. It's that nice changing between seasons. Cool. So, we've got another exciting guest. Do you want to tell us who's going to be on the show today?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are very excited today because we are bringing on someone who has just been very deep in the world of crypto communities. Somebody who understands it well, somebody who has built multiple of them out, and somebody who has worked with a lot of people in the crypto space for a fairly long period of time. So that's BTCVIX. Let's bring him on and let's get him started.
Hey guys.
Hey Wix, how are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me on. Certainly an honor to be considered a OG community guy and in crypto. That's it's quite the title.
Well, you surely have earned it, right?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you've been around long enough. We know you've been around for, I would say, almost a decade, 2013 and onwards, and been at the forefront of a lot of the crypto community, being part of it, building it, working with them, understanding from them, and helping them evolve. So what we would love to start off with is, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, and then let's jump right into the evolution of these crypto communities. How have you seen them? What have you learned? And what are they all about?
Sure. So I think the real element of how I got into Bitcoin was I always was on the side of, I kind of come to that libertarian type viewpoint on the world and the kind of the gold bug, hard money, sound money aspect. But one thing I noticed kind of going into those communities is it was kind of like a lot of old guys, a very depressing very depressing community that was like they're what they were cheering is kind of like a doomsday type scenario. And that was, I still was like, well, I was skeptical about the Federal Reserve. I understood all that, and I understood all of the really core concepts of the libertarian mindset around money and stuff like that. However, I just kind of never really felt it was like my place. And then when I found Bitcoin, I mean, it just kind of was like, well, this is like everything that I've been waiting for. And especially that I just went full into Bitcoin and the trying to understand absolutely everything I could about it. And what I noticed is there was a tremendous amount of excitement. It was, I don't want to use the word fun because that sounds like a little bit like cheesy, but there was a lot of energy there, and it was positive energy. It wasn't this kind of, old man yells at cloud type, people that were there. It was new people, and there's just so much excitement there. So I guess that was kind of the opening, stanza on how I got into Bitcoin. And then, it was early 2013. I'd actually discovered it, I think, on a Peter Schiff podcast. I think he might have had Eric Voorhees on. Yeah. So, I mean, there's your crossover from Goldbug to, crypto bug or whatever you want to call it. And I found probably my first platform I really used was BTCVIX. And this is early 2013. It certainly wasn't the powerhouse it's become today. And I think that, along with having I'd always been interested in trading. I had tried the penny stock stuff, was kind of like stumbling my way, losing a bunch of money, not knowing what to do. But I was still evolving as a trader. And coming on to BTCVIX, I actually was mostly interested on their what they now call their margin lending aspect to it, because back then you could get 5,000% APY. You don't see that today, but now we have the whole DeFi farming stuff, which is a little bit of similar but different. So the experience there was cool. Time went by. Then we kind of had the later 2013 bubble, and during this time, I'd started to get involved in some of the local Bitcoin meetup stuff. Kind of became a little bit of a leader there, and I kind of felt that was what I was kind of good at, is doing some element of organizing people. Because back then, there wasn't a lot. I'm not a tech guy. I'm not a developer. So it kind of was like, well, if you're not doing one of those couple things, what's your purpose here in crypto? You can be a passive buy and hold investor, sure, but I wanted to do so much more. So I didn't really think of it like that, but I ended up growing into that position, a little bit with the stuff that went on in terms of, the meetup groups. And then eventually, kind of at the tail end of the 2013 bubble that boiled into 2014, I ended up finding TradingView. Now, TradingView was probably one of the first very large platforms in terms of charting that listed Bitcoin as an instrument. So that was kind of the initial aspect, and then I found the TradingView chat room that was the Bitcoin centric one. And through there, I met a number of people with same interests as me. Where the market was going crazy. This is kind of right around the end of Mt. Gox period of time, and then the China bans Bitcoin, which lasted a couple months. So there was a tremendous amount of action and just volatility in the markets that made it great for traders. So it wasn't too long after that a few of us jumped on a Google Hangout and just talked markets and chatted. I started to get to know these guys. But Google Hangouts only has a maximum of 10 people on it. So we quickly outgrew that. We then ended up over on TeamSpeak, which ended up growing into the several hundreds of people. And I think the real aspect that changed things is the whole concept of pit trading, right? Is kind of an obsolete. It's a relic of the past, like the CME pit trader screaming and all that. But I think so much of the voice component and interaction during really high volatile periods in the market captures a lot of the emotion. Sometimes it's not even about what's being said necessarily. It's what you feel in the room. You can feel fear or you can feel euphoria. So I think that was a very interesting aspect to the community development and why it's so important even going forward that I can touch on in a little bit. Is that a pretty good opening aspect to, I guess, my intro to communities?
Well, yeah, absolutely, Wix. Yeah. So there is a, part that makes me a little curious is that, you spoke about this sort of longing for people of similar interest, if you may, right? Where you could go and talk about things and you could discuss and like you said, have shared emotions. Now, over the years, have you seen that change? I mean, what you were talking about back in 2013, I'm sure was different from what you were talking, let's say 2015, and then later in terms of, let's say 2018 and beyond. So have you been, what is it in terms of emotions, if you may, right? How has that changed in terms of the momentum, emotion, the type of community, if you may?
Well, I think more than anything, the it back then it was just Bitcoin, really. I mean, Bitcoin was what you were trading. Many of
Hmm.
us were on OKCoin, then over to BitMEX, trading on very high leverage and such like that. So that was all the focus. Now, it seems like Bitcoin has its place, but it's less interesting to a lot of people. So the emotion is a little bit more spread out. It's not as concentrated in Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is doing. So there's a little bit different factor there. When people speak, they tend to be speaking about kind of the hot new projects, um, stuff like that. Back then, we were still talking about Bitcoin development. I mean, I don't think
Hmm.
anybody talks about Bitcoin development anymore because there really isn't much. A little bit on Lightning and stuff, and there's
Yeah.
and, and there's nothing actually wrong with that, really. I think in a sea of innovation or attempted innovation, Bitcoin being boring is actually its appeal. That's actually why people its innovation is that it actually doesn't innovate. I know that sounds like like paradoxal, but it actually that's what gives it its value, because it's not the one trying to cure cancer and stuff like that.
Right. The more reliable, the more stable in the pack, if you may, to whatever extent it can be. Right.
Exactly. So I think that's been kind of the biggest shift. I'd certainly Swapman and I should say, like, we ended up, just to rewind slightly, when we ended up going over the TeamSpeak group, we were Whale Club.
Hmm.
The TeamSpeak group and then the Telegram group came, roughly, I don't know, 9 months later. It was sometime midsummer of 2015. So that was the more heavy, chat component, because none of the platforms really do everything in terms of, like, whether it be Discord, Telegram, TeamSpeak. None of them do everything like the best. And each has its kind of different component, and the community ends up kind of on multiple platforms, which is fine.
Hmm.
There was a split, and Whalepool was born, and they ended up taking most of the TeamSpeak community, which was fine. I mean, there was a bunch of drama there, and that's part of talking about communities, is as the community grows over time and evolves, there's going to be fracturing. It's just like a lot of times, like religion, where you have the Protestants and the Catholics and stuff like that. And I don't think it should be seen necessarily as a bad thing. It's just inevitable. Certain people are going to have maybe somebody's deep into privacy coins. That's what they want to talk about more. And they create their own little group. And then that group becomes a bigger group. And then they go through fracturing. So I think part of me personally has been not really looking at that as something negative or bad. It's just part of the process, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting because obviously we've seen some large online communities just completely implode. But it sounds like letting them fork or fragment or kind of go off in different directions, almost like we've seen with the crypto, kind of the chains themselves forking and, kind of capital and money going in different directions. Do you feel like it's healthy for a community to just keep evolving rather than trying to stay as one big thing?
I mean, it's a tough hill on all sides, because if there's probably a balance somewhere in the middle. And I think one thing I've learned at being an admin of so many of these communities and such is usually the truth is somewhere in the middle. And getting like super polarized, whether it be, we see this stuff, information come out in the market, and there's kind of a binary type condition that usually is erected in terms of the argument, like it's either this or this. But that's actually framing it incorrectly. It's probably somewhere in the middle, and it's probably a balance too of how much you want to keep the community um, in line with maybe the original vision, and how much you're going to allow other people to either change it or go on their own ways. Because with Whale Club, we tried to keep it much more trader centric, And as things would go in sideways, or the markets weren't as interesting, conversation would turn off topic. And there's a certain point where new people coming in and such would come on and listen to something that was extremely off topic, and they would get turned off, not come back. So somewhere in there's a balance too, because if you go overly strict, then you probably result in overfracturing. If you don't moderate enough, then your brand gets diluted, and then you don't have an identity anymore. So there's somewhere in the middle there that it has to be balanced. I'm not saying I have the best answer. I think it's almost a pendulum. I think at times it swings less moderation. Sometimes it swings to, okay, we got to refocus and not stray too much, because what people believe the community is and show up for is now what they're not getting. So there's somewhere in the middle there that's where the balance is, and it's a very delicate thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think the expectation management usually is a ongoing challenge, and especially as a community admin, I'm sure you see that up close. How are your current communities sort of interacting in that mode? We understand you are also in the middle of some very exciting new large emerging communities, and just looking at that versus all the other stuff you've seen in the past, do you see any difference in terms of how it's forming now, or do you think it's just another iteration of the same stuff?
Yeah, this is certainly the Satoshi Street Bets group, as well as the Wall Street Bets group. These are concepts that became such a monumental force, and it's something that wasn't conceptualized from me. I'm just more like the gardener, making sure that there's walking down through the garden, pulling out some weeds here and there, because this has gone from some little niche Reddit communities to now being a tremendous movement globally even. So that's been also a balance too. And Wall Street Bets, the subreddit itself, it still does not allow any crypto talk at all, which is a little bit unfortunate, I think. But there's a balance there too. You don't want the channel getting overrun by crypto talk when it should be, especially during market hours. We try and maintain, stocks only. That still becomes a difficult task, because Telegram specifically is very crypto centric. Between the proximity of the Wall Street Bets Telegram group to the rest of the crypto community is so close that there is inevitably a lot of spillover there. So that has been a challenge. Certainly during the explosive growth of late January. I mean, I just had the group as I wasn't really putting a lot of time into Wall Street Bets. When I started a couple of years ago, I had just a couple thousand people on it, and it wasn't until the day where they got false flagged by someone saying there's racist or something on the subreddit and the Discord, and they got taken down for a brief period of time. And it was really Telegram, which is a lot less, it's not US based, not US centric, was kind of the overflow, and the overflow became now just a monumental force as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, Wix, there is another part to this whole movement that we've been seeing since, I guess, last year. I mean, with the pandemic, and then so much of sort of, just overall global change and global upheaval going on. Certainly the markets were buzzing, and the markets were, getting their all-time high. And we obviously also saw the beginning of a massive bull run in the crypto universe. And so I think what we would love to get your viewpoint on is how do you see this current bull run, the crypto bull run, not just BTC, but the broader universe evolving over the next few months? Do you think it's a super cycle or something of that form that a lot of people are sort of big proponents or do you just think this is yet another boom bust and we're in the boom phase and there'd be a bust soon enough? How do you view it evolving? What's your viewpoint on it?
I mean, it's always very tough to ascertain where in the cycle you are. I'm a believer that as the market cap increases, the cycles tend to get longer. So that would mean that we probably have quite a bit more of the bull run to go, and just from kind of those metrics as they are. Certainly, we're starting to see. I mean, I think the global markets are in an incredible bull near bubble run right now. It's almost like everything is just levitating and flying. And certainly, when you see stuff like GameStop go from $2 to 500, you have to kind of take a step back and take it all in and try and find, like, where are we in this whole cycle. And I think Bitcoin, here's a big part when you asked, it brings in one of the questions you asked earlier, how have things changed? Well, Bitcoin used to just be its own little, it was dancing to its own tune, right? It wasn't really plugged into the legacy system like it is now. We got, GBTC, we got futures. Now we're going to have Coinbase, which I believe is listing, is that Tuesday or Wednesday?
That's correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, like, we've come so far, and, crypto is now in the vernacular and vocabulary of all, people in finance. It's, I usually have CNBC on in the background during, typical market days, and it's never, the Bitcoin does not ever not get mentioned, and it's usually on their little ticker thing. So it's now part of the system, and I think we definitely seen how interconnected and correlated that market can get when we had that extremely violent sell-off last year around March time,
right?
And Bitcoin tanked right with the rest of it, because I think there was this, I always was pretty critical of this idea that, well, during the next stock market collapse, everyone's just going to buy Bitcoin, and it's just like that's what they're going to go to. And I said, well, that's under a lot of assumptions. First of all, it's under the next financial crisis, or sorry, the next I guess bear market or crash, as easily called, would be predicated on some financial banking related crisis, which this one wasn't. So maybe that would have been different if the same conditions were from 2008. But we saw Bitcoin just acted like a high flying tech stock and tanked even more. So I think right now we're in up correlation. Bitcoin's outperforming now. It was underperforming earlier after the initial recovery from the pandemic lows, but I think there's really has to be addressed of how much Bitcoin actually is interconnected in the system now. It's been assimilated, and that can be good or bad. The moves are much different than I feel than they were in 2015 or even 2016, 17. So yeah,
that's a good point. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, also really interesting, because it used to be, you could kind of say to somebody new looking into the space of, okay, yes, there's a whole lot of things happening in crypto, but maybe just stick to the majors, buy Bitcoin or ETH, and then get your feet wet and get started. But now there's just so much more, kind of options available to that kind of retail person coming in. And yet, from your point there of kind of like, if Bitcoin's slightly assimilated into market trends, where should be, kind of new investors be looking for information, and how might they navigate the market?
Yeah, I mean, there's been such an explosion in analytics, right? In terms of, whether it be social media, filtering, on-chain transactions and such like that. And that's what we've, I think, really evolved to. It used to just basically be, you had a Twitter feed and you had like hashtag Bitcoin on there or something, or hack, and you were just kind of waiting for some, esoteric piece of news to capture that. Now there's just tremendous amounts of more things going into the equation that you're always trying to parse all this information. And maybe I'm just kind of a little bit old school. I still use the Twitter feed probably more than anything to gather my information and try and, sift through everything. And then, there's I do have a couple, like all the big movements on chain, especially Tether. Tether creation tends to be something a lot of other people look at. So as a trader, something I look at as well. That's probably where I would start. It's still a process. You surf a number of different media, Reddit, which maybe a little bit, not as much as for Bitcoin specifically, but for all of the new stuff that's going on in DeFi. Like on the Binance Smart Chain, especially, how that's really become the go-to DeFi platform as of now, just because of its much lower gas fees than Ethereum and ERC20. So it's still a patchwork of things, and I think maybe I'm just old. I have an old habit, but that's the way I'm going to do it still.
Yeah, well, that's a good point to make there, Wix, that there is a ton of information, opinion, sort of quick analysis on social media, right? On Twitter, on Telegram, just about everywhere. And there's also this more structured type of research that's coming hand in hand with it. And it's interesting, both have their place. So yeah, for sure. In terms of just going back towards markets and how things are evolving, I think one of the pieces that we have been keeping a sort of keen eye on is this entire spectrum of the sort of application space or DeFi space, right? So if you look at sort of 2018 onwards, more so 2019, we started seeing a lot of real applications, and a lot of these were basically DeFi applications emerging in the world of Ethereum, right? And part of the reason why we see today all these sort of high gas costs and congestion, in some sense, is a result of the fact that Ethereum has become a very big chain as far as a lot of these real assets and real sort of DeFi volumes that have increased over a period of time, right? There are billions of dollars, sort of total value locked. There are incredibly heavily used and adopted platforms from the likes of, you've got Compound and Maker and SNX and Aave and on and on and on, right? There's so many that have emerged. And then, of course, the DEXs have also become far bigger today than they were, even 3 years back, right? So we certainly see that happening. But I think Wixie pointed out a very interesting piece. You kind of just touched upon, alluded to it, is the fact that gas price is too high, right? Transaction cost is too high. Thereby also at the same time, while it's becoming more popular, it's raising this big relevant question that is it even a viable platform, right? I mean, unless you are sitting on a multi-million-dollar portfolio and you don't worry about paying, a couple of $100 in gas, even there, perhaps you do because it eats into your margin. Certainly the small and medium trader is finding it very hard to even operate on Ethereum. And from there, we are seeing the emergence of all these alternatives, right? All these challengers, Binance Smart Chain, Solana, I think Polkadot, what have you, right? There's too much going on there. What is your take on it? I think we want to hear your worldview of how you see it evolving. What are you seeing that is very interesting? What makes you sort of think harder, if you may? So tell us a bit about that. What are you saying, and what is your community also saying about it?
Yeah, I think you've pretty much so nailed it there. Is the average ape retail investor that's interested in all of these new projects coming out is just simply priced out on ERC20. To do anything in their price range, they're having to more or less take a somewhere between a 5 and a 15% haircut to enter any of these projects. So it doesn't really take too much thought to think, well, that's becomes just a massive friction and a non-starter. So I have to say, I'm certainly really heavy into and a big believer in the Binance side of things. And I'll make the bold prediction here that I think Binance and BNB flips Ethereum within this year. So
all right, okay.
Yeah, if you want. So I mean, either people are going to be like he was right, or they're going to laugh at me in a few months. But I just really think that it's gathering so much momentum, and I'm like, I have charts up. I got the 6 screens. People are always like, "What do you do over there?" I'm like, well, got to watch a lot of charts. I mean, we're sitting right here and buying it. BNB is making all-time highs. So that I just, and the apes, and when I talk to the apes, they almost tune out completely if the project is solely based on the ERC20 protocol. They just really, oh nope, don't care. You know, like they don't want to go on Uniswap. They want to be over on PancakeSwap and be on that whole side of things, and that's just I think it's just going to continue to become a growing problem. I don't think Ethereum has a real solidified solution to this in the near term, and I think that's just going to continue to cost them. I mean, they'll get their act together at some point. I'm certainly not on the development knowledge side of that, but I don't see this really going away. And CZ is, I call him Mr. Wizard. I talked with him a lot in the early days of OKCoin when he was developing futures over there, and he is just an incredible force to be reckoned with. I will say, to offer a little bit of counterpoint, or to my over bullishness on Binance and the BSC side of things, is outside of really FTX, which has their partnership with Binance, we've seen over the years almost definitely a reluctance, and pretty much so almost like an embargo, where other exchanges don't really like to list other exchanges like specific token, right? You don't see Bitfinex having BNB listed on their exchange. It's just been kind of one of those, well, they're too close to comfort as a competitor to do something like that. So that could be a real it could be a hindrance. I don't know if it's a deal breaker or something that's going to become a big issue, but not having the other exchanges want to get on board with them could end up becoming an issue down the road. I don't think it is right now. And maybe centralized exchanges, now that DeFi has really exploded, and the fact that you can just throw up your MetaMask, go on PancakeSwap, and through a couple of clicks almost do stuff cheaper than you would on a centralized exchange, and almost at the same speed. There's not really as much driving force to get listed on those centralized exchanges than it used to be. There still will be. It's still a part of the ecosystem, but I think all that's kind of what I'm seeing. Kind of like are they going to run into some issues with just not being able to list on other exchanges and such like that? And ERC20 doesn't have that issue.
Right.
Yeah. And we've been looking at BNB and kind of the evolution of Binance Smart Chain a bit in our Charthead series. And one of the main things we're seeing there was obviously BNB was purely an exchange token. Then they did their first kind of Binance chain, right? And it was being used at that network or protocol level. And now it's kind of gone the full spectrum, and it is like an Ethereum, kind of a native network asset with those smart contracts and all the juicy stuff that DeFi offers. And as you mentioned, MetaMask, it's like switching networks. So it's really interesting to see how that's been kind of, I guess, priced in the last few months, of people realizing that it's no longer just a exchange token. And I guess maybe that might also change whether BNB is listed on some of the other dominant exchanges now that it's more of a native crypto asset. What do you reckon?
I think too, it's one of those things where how long can some of these other competitors really, reluctantly ignore the power of what Binance Smart Chain is doing with DeFi right now? The action is there, and exchanges are usually in the business of going to where the action is, right? They need the flow, they want the volume, and that's how they make their money, and that's their business. So at some point they have to weigh whether taking a competitor's coin in kind of the old sense, and then weighing that with what are they losing in profits by not really embracing or wanting to interact and list some of these other projects that is built on one of their competitors' protocols. So somewhere in there, there's got to be a tipping point of it just gets too hard to ignore, and the exchanges actually that don't do it are going to suffer more and be ignored. I mean, during this whole move, we've seen a lot less interest in centralized exchanges in general, probably outside of Binance.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like? I don't quite know, but every time as Binance continues to rage on here, like almost making another all-time high right now, does that in a potential, I mean, my bold call of flipping Ethereum, where does that stand where you're now an exchange and you're not listing the number 2 coin on planet Earth? I don't know. To me, I think that's probably, if I was on the business side of things, I'd have to go under a lot of consideration that it's time to probably stop this lack or exclusivity where you can't list those projects or that coin and stuff like that.
That's a good point, Vix. See, there is another part to it that just sort of pops at me, is that with the emergence of Uniswap, we have anyway start seeing all the sort of token transactions, if you may, or plain old good trading, right? Token to token trading kind of move to that sort of a interaction model, right? That is also evolving, but that's already sort of proven, and we saw Sushi emerge, and then of course right now you mentioned PancakeSwap, which is incredibly successful and also very gamified, right? Which makes it even more fun. So I certainly see that there is another aspect to it, which is that the traditional style of coin-to-coin trading on a centralized venue in general may not be the most attractive way of entering crypto at all, right? People might enter and play more in all these swap venues of various types that make it fun, give you great yields, right? Like they give you a lot of easy options, and then of course they're decentralized and you hold your coins at all times. Do you buy into that? Do you think that
I think so. This is a little bit more. It's on the lines of answering a question, but let me frame it this way. I think actually so right now, I think in the cycle that the point in the cycle that we are at, I can see it. I think everyone can see it in the way DeFi is now swallowing up all of the consciousness of so many people in the market, that it's at the point of people are trying to find out, there's new projects coming out all the time. There's the Launchpad stuff that's really started to, it's just getting fired up now. It's about what's the new thing, what's the new girl on the block that's looks pretty, basically. At some point though, as we saw during 2017, after the bubble top crashed down, you had the ICO projects there still rebound, still have appetite. But then as those investors started losing money and going away, or it's not as fun anymore, right? People always want to love talking to everybody and be in all the chat groups when they're making money. When they stop making money and start losing money, then they usually pack up and go away. And on the Telegram side, and we've seen a number of communities. Aztec, I'm sure you guys might be familiar with him, actually has I should try and find it, has a chart of basically the top crypto groups from 2017 and what their basically loss of members over specific periods of time. And it's only been the last several months where we started to see some turnaround in those specific crypto groups. Now, some of those are communities, communities as years go by end up, getting superseded by other communities. So that might not be a good gauge of things, but it's an interesting concept. And I think what I was getting to with this is that I still think the centralized exchanges have the superior product and domination in the derivative side of things. So as we transition from, you just don't buy whatever new project is and it goes up 100x, where that doesn't work anymore. And, Joe Ape has a choice, or maybe out of necessity, he either goes back to working at McDonald's and not trading shit coins anymore, or he starts to learn how to use leverage and futures and stuff like that. And hopefully he learns how to do that before he goes broke doing that as well. So I think down that path is where the centralized exchange element comes back in, if that makes sense. Because I really haven't seen a lot, and I'm sure there are some, like these kind of DeFi, decentralized options and leverage platforms. I talked to Darabit on our podcast, and I was kind of asking them about that stuff, but it seems so early in that side of things. And I'd actually would like some your guys, not to role reversal, but have you guys really seen anything on that side of things as far as DeFi that's really really blew your mind? I see some stuff, but I'm still feels like it's still pretty far away.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think that what we see is certainly there's a lot of activity there, right? I think the world has noticed that a lot of the trading activity, a lot of the volume is going to evolve, where it will go from just standard sort of coin-to-coin trading or fiat-to-coin trading to more evolved products, right? Whether it's futures or options or perpetual swaps, which is incredibly popular. And then, of course, other forms of collateralized or other sort of derived instruments. The DeFi world is certainly sort of on it. There is a lot of action with the layer 2 centric experiences as well, right from leverage to DeFi DX now to, if you start looking at all these newer ones like perpetual protocol or Vega, I think, which is just about born, and then there are a couple on the options side, but I think most of them are new, and most of them are new to the extent that they don't have the types of volumes and the types of flow that centralized exchange has today. And in our opinion, I think it's going to be a bit of a journey. Like, it's not going to be a sudden flip, but I think just like it took a little bit for the decentralized alternatives to sort of mature and come in and then take the place of centralized exchanges in standard sort of coin-to-coin swaps and trading. We feel like there might be something that's boiling here, just kind of coming together, and some real possibilities sort of really being formed at this point in time, which possibly might become challengers and then maybe even supersede them. But yes, we are still early. I mean, that's what I think. Paul, do you want to chime in there? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's also part of it is that inertia. If you've already got your derivatives trading, algos, and bots set up on a centralized exchange, trying to learn something new that isn't just plugging in an API key can be quite a barrier to some of those traders and firms. So yeah, getting the experience and the liquidity to what matches those centralized exchanges is still a engineering and technical challenge. But as Shanky mentioned, there's a few projects that are getting a bit closer to that. And if we see their liquidities grow, then yeah, I could totally see that kind of bastion, if you like, of centralized exchanges also coming to the world of DeFi and coming on chain.
Yeah, and I think some of the derivative centric products too, they're coming along with the bull market, but they're not excuse me, they're not the central focus. And if we can just go back to some of the comparisons to late 2017 into 2018, it wasn't until I want to say sometime around somewhere between like March or April into early summer, May, when you saw BitMEX actually hit peak volume. So BitMEX was hitting peak volume well after the bull market had ended. And it became where people went after they couldn't just buy a coin and it went up 100x, right? So there's a process there. We're going to lose a lot of people on the way down. It's just inevitable, but we're going to keep some of them too. And some of those people, I mean, they might be like Asterisk and lose all their money on high leverage. Or they could be people that actually figure it out and then are kind of part of a lot of people that we know in common. I mean, Swapman, who you had on the podcast, like we are all just derivatives traders, and we know that that part of the cycle is coming again at some point, and there's going to be a big learning curve of who survives. Some of these people that bought some of these coins it's going to go down 98% or something like that. That's a pretty big kick in the mouth, and people sometimes that might turn them off, and they're not going to be too happy about crypto or DeFi, or something's going to leave a bad taste in their mouth. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Maybe not in the super near term, but there's going to be a point where something like that happens. Even maybe if we went through a long period of sideways consolidation, you might see the derivatives exchanges get a little bit more front and center.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I was seeing more analysis from another common friend, Josh at Carpe Noctem this morning, and this chart was showing that the amount of Ethereum on centralized exchanges is as low as it was in March 2020, and definitely if you marry that up with total value locked in DeFi at that kind of 50 to 60 billion, it definitely paints that longer story that people are likely to kind of get into DeFi and stay there. But then to your point, they've also got to have some kind of safety around it so that they're not just getting hacked or rug pulled and down 95% and walking away. So there's a lot of maturity that still needs to come to the DeFi space.
Absolutely. What do you think, Vix? Is that how you're also seeing it? Sort of early innings?
Yeah, so that is how I'm seeing it. And I mean, I try and keep my eyes open for all of the stuff that's trader centric, because that's probably of the most interest to me when it comes to just my background and how long I've been in the space. That's like back in 2015, I remember I went to my first Bitcoin conference. It was Inside Bitcoins, which I'm not even sure if it's still I think they might have changed to some other branding, but it was in the basement of the Java Center in New York. There was about 400 or 500 people there. There was some fashion show going on upstairs, which was kind of a weird combination. Have a bunch of girls and Victoria's Secret and a bunch of complete nerds downstairs, which is, I guess that's where we belonged back then. And we're in the depths of the bear market. And I remember there's probably total maybe like 15 to 20 exhibits, and pretty much so walking around that little exhibit hall encompassed all of what crypto was. That you could make that venture and probably if you're really in depth a couple hours if you wanted to get talk to everyone there. But now it's like the space has just exploded so massively, and there's so many niches that aren't niches anymore. They're entire ecosystems. So that's where the interesting thing comes, because there's no longer the ability to really know everything that's going on in crypto. You have to have a skill set and expertise and kind of focus there, because you'll spend all this other time trying to figure other stuff out, and you won't really get far enough to use that knowledge. So I think that's what the biggest part of it is. And even seeing the NFT explosion that we've just recently seen, that's a whole cottage industry that's not a cottage industry anymore. I don't know if you guys know Theo Goodman, but he's always been on kind of the rare Pepe, all of that stuff that was on Counterparty, and he actually does live auctions, not just the current NFT model, at least from a marketplace perspective, is right. You have it's a passive process, like what eBay is. You're an artist. You kind of list your portfolio or your offering, and then it's kind of up to you to how do you market that. You got to get people there that are interested in your stuff, and then they will they'll look at it and they can put in a bid, and that's the process. But what Theo's doing, and now that we have the Telegram voice component, is he's actually a full-on auctioneer.
Oh wow!
And he's able to. He's gotten pretty good at it. I always kind of joke. I'm like, Theo, when are you going to get to like one of those, cattle auctioneer levels. But I mean, the process is pretty smooth, right? He's the only one speaking. He's calling out the bids. He's so knowledgeable on especially the rare Pepe stuff, where he knows the guys that made it, and one of the guys, unfortunately passed away, but he knows like what series this is, and who wins the collection. I mean, so to see that, I think that's like, I've been really interested in that component too, because that's even a next evolution of the NFT marketplace. Is the you need an auctioneer hype man. You need somebody to, right? And think about these artists that they're trying to build something for themselves. Now they can go to basically a captive audience where they're going to get all the eyeballs for at least a small period of time, looking at their artwork, trying to figure out what the pricing is. I think that's like a really brilliant thing that just kind of organically manifested itself recently.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the concept of a live auction with interaction with context is definitely richer than a passive, listing, if you may. So yeah, totally buy into that. Maybe, Paul, we need to find Theo Goodman and bring him as a guest as well and make him auction some stuff on our show someday.
I would recommend bringing Theo on. I mean, Theo's always full of he's always full of these very unique skill sets, and that's one of them.
Excellent. Well, we'll definitely do that. We'll definitely try to get him on board. I have one more question, Vix. While this is going on, as you mentioned, BNB's been hitting like a couple of times, hit an all-time high. It did some and it did some more, and I think we are above 520 or something at the moment. If I may ask, again, this is no investment advice. Where do you see it going? Where is it going? I know you said it was going to flip ETH. That's your big prediction. But in the next few days, where is it going? Is it hitting the 1,000 soon? Is it going to be around this range? What's your take?
Well, I don't know what the. It's like usually during the weekends I try and kind of decompress a little bit. So I'd have to redo the calculation. It's probably what Binance BNB probably has to do about a 3 to 4x from here, maybe a little less, to flip Ethereum. And we broke out here. I mean, all the momentum's there. I don't really see how it. It doesn't really even. I don't think it's that outrageous of a call anymore. I really don't. So yeah, I think it's just gonna. The breakout had happened. I don't know if it does it in this wave right now, but I mean, all of the stars and the factors are aligned for BNB to do that, and I just continue to see so many projects that are by necessity are either having to port over to Binance Smart Chain, or projects that were in the works have had to pivot and just go right to Binance Smart Chain. So until that changes, and I mean, I don't really want to diss some of the other protocols. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess I don't really. The DOT has probably been the least impressive to me. I'm not really sure about that, but I think Avalanche. I've gotten to know that one a little bit. That one is cool. I just got to find out about I think it's Thorchain. So I mean, I'm not over here trying to say that it's end all be all. I just know it has network effect, and that network effect is extremely powerful. So that's the side of me, and I can't. I gotta probably taper down my bullishness, which probably means it's the top then.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's that network effect and it's the follow through, right? Because we did see with the likes of EOS or Tron, they managed to get a lot of community, but then they just couldn't follow through, and eventually kind of tapered off, and those communities went. They're probably now what's there behind, kind of Binance Smart Chain, right? They didn't disappear. They just found the next network which seemed to have the right kind of groundwork or kind of fertile soil there for growth. So it's interesting. Cool.
Yeah. No, that's exactly the right elements. And I'll say this in kind of conclusion to my probably over bullishness to BNB. A lot of my in real life friends have, they may have made it as far as getting over to Binance. Most of them are basically on like Coinbase or Coinbase Pro, and many of them, other than maybe a few of them, have never actually used the protocols, right? They went on Coinbase, they set up an account, and they bought Ethereum, and they probably did some some simple research, and it's the future, it's the programmable money, blah blah. But they don't realize that the utility of the ERC20 contract it's not there. It's been degraded to the point of not even being usable for the significant majority of people that want to use it for DeFi projects. So they want to make these arguments with me that Ethereum's undervalued, it hasn't participated, but it will. And I think this also goes on to the same idea when people talk a lot about Bitcoin dominance, right? And they're going to talk about an alt season. Now they're all looking at old metrics from 2017 during when Ethereum did its absolute massive ICO portion of the boom. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to kind of fractalize that and use certain almost TA on the dominance of Bitcoin. And my point has been we're actually entering that, and the alt to BTC ratio, which is still is the largest alt component, is Ethereum. So Ethereum's Ethereum's just a passenger on this run. It's not. It doesn't mean people that buy Ethereum are going to lose money. They'll get gains. They're just not going to get as big a gains, in my opinion. They're not leading this, and I think that's the biggest thing with my in real life friends. They talk about it. I'm like, have you actually used it? Have you used Uniswap? Have you incurred 150 in gas fees trying to buy these projects? Because if you haven't, then I don't really feel like you're really educated enough to make this opinion.
Yeah, and then I guess also you get the ETH natives who were in before 2017 who have used it, and they just shrug at $150 gas fees, right? It's just not a big burden for their bags where they're at now. So yeah, I don't think we'll see potentially everything move across, but as you say, some of those new projects are definitely looking at a more fertile network for launching into.
Okay. There are some cross-chain solutions, and I'm still kind of in the learning process of those as well, and some of it's kind of like, from what I've seen, is like a subsidized model where they use the fees to try and make it less, it's less of a cost if you're trying to do some of the ERC like exchanges and stuff like that. But I'm not quite sure if I really believe that model, because if people start to realize that, okay, they go to a TriDex or whatever it be, multi-chain DEX, if they know they can go on as simple as a click, connect their MetaMask to PancakeSwap and do it cheaper, they're just going to do that, Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of the real hindrance I see on some of the cross-chain multi-chain dexes that are trying to solve the problem. I'm just not sure that their solution is the right one yet.
Interesting. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we're going to jump into one of the most fun parts of the show, which definitely gets some interesting answers and commentary going. That's our kind of rapid fire. Are you ready, Vix?
Yep.
Cool. All right. First off, which would you rather trade, NFTs or Bitcoin perpetuals?
Perpetuals.
Okay. All right. And then what's common between kind of the 2017 and 2021 bull run?
The move over into just trying to find the newest projects and to buy them and then hold, number go up.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. Okay, so then in your opinion, what's the biggest single kind of use case for crypto in the coming decades?
Speculation and degenerate gambling.
Yeah, so no change then.
Probably true.
Okay, number 4, complete the sentence. DeFi makes.
Number go up.
Yeah.
Is that one
Apes
again?
virtue.
Apes, yeah. Apes together strong. How about that one?
Yeah.
How about that one?
Oh, I like that. That's like a quotable quote. DeFi makes apes together strong.
Perfect. And then, actually, I've doubled up the questions. Sorry about that. Cool. All right, we'll leave it with apes together strong. That was, really fun to cover all of your experience with the community and a lot of that insight, Vix. Really appreciate everything you've kind of shared there. And thanks for taking the time out as well.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This is certainly a walk down memory lane, and I love to share it and love to talk about it. Thank you for having me on.
Well, we enjoyed. So, and we'll probably call you back at some point in time.
All right.
Cool. Thank you. It looks like you had a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, I think it was a great discussion. It's always nice to bring on OGs who have, seen the landscape for quite a while, right? They've seen it evolve, and BTCVIX is certainly in the epicenter of a lot of interesting crypto communities. So I think it was great chatting with him. I really enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed it too.
Yeah, no, lots of viewers live there as well. Not so much in the chat, but I think, lot to digest there as well. And looking forward to next week. Tell us a bit about the next kind of OG and interesting crypto person we're going to talk to.
Yeah, next week we've got another very interesting guest, a slightly different kind of a guest. People, even if they don't know him, they certainly have seen his software. So with that said, he's the guy who built the Gecko trading bot. So for folks who've been trying to do automated trading in the crypto world, they certainly have heard of, probably used the Gecko trading bot. It's a very popular Python open source trading bot with the name Gecko inspired after the movie character Gecko, if you may. And then, it became very popular, and I believe he has moved on and done a lot of other interesting things. And of course, we will talk to him next week, and we will share the link and let folks know about how Mike Van Rossum, that's his name, how he got about building it, and what's his story. We also have a lot of other things going. Absolutely. So, I was going to just mention the same thing, that we are on Twitter. We are just building sort of our, Twitter presence, and we are sharing everything that we are creating, a lot of the good content that, our listeners are liking. So go follow us at Going Elliptic, and you will not miss anything that's coming from our side. And then, of course, we've got the newsletter going, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, just put out the second kind of edition there with a lot of the DeFi correlation analysis, which we'd covered in a earlier kind of video kind of stream there, and another newsletter episode, brewing there, about to go out. So do subscribe, both YouTube, Twitter, and at Going Elliptic, and you'll get all of the content that we're producing for everyone out there. Yeah,
truly. And again, this whole program or this entire show is about educational content. We are here to share all the stuff that we have learned and we are continuing to learn. And so do expect some good content. Don't expect any shilling. Don't expect any investment advice either, right? So that's not what the show is for. But yes, you should walk out of this with some interesting and good content, hopefully some newer content as well that perhaps you haven't seen elsewhere. On that note, I think, we will do our Charted, which we do weekly. If you haven't seen it, you can certainly go look at the past recordings. We also bring some of that in our newsletters, and we're thinking we'll double down on the majors this time, perhaps only BTC, and look into a lot of different ways, not just the standard sort of trading view charts and price action recently, but also just broader sense of how it has evolved, and what we should watch out for. So yeah, we'll probably record that afterwards, maybe tomorrow or so. But we will we'll again announce that via our Twitter handle, right? So come follow us there, and you will get to know when that's coming online.
Excellent. Well, yeah, thanks, Shanky. Thanks again, Vix. That was another episode of Going Elliptic. See you next time.
Absolutely.